That was so, it was like you were reading off of a teleprompter. It's incredible. So like Paige said, I'm Chef Jared Dreyer. I'm the executive chef for catering and retail. And today we're going to take a little dive down the Cuban rabbit hole. A little spin on some classics. So first we're going to start with, we're going to get our black beans and rice going. And out of your box, it's going to require the bacon, the onions and peppers, some black beans, which is in the container that's labeled BB, our whole cloves of garlic, our rice, our container that's labeled cumin and oregano, and our other paper container that just has a plain B on it. That will actually be our chicken base, and that is it for that. So I'll set that aside. And so, real quick, now beans and rice are a facet throughout all of Latin America. Really, they're a staple of most African and Latin American cuisines, because a lot of Latin America, especially in the islands, are influenced heavily from African cuisine because of the slave trade. So a lot of locals picked up foods that were coming over. Won't worry about the bacon in just a minute. We'll get my garlic out. Make sure I got my black beans open. We're gonna go ahead and turn, if you have a small saucepan on a burner, go ahead and turn it on now over medium heat while we cut these onions and peppers and whatnot up. You don't want it too hot, because what we're going to do is we're going to do something called rendering. We're going to render the fat from the bacon, which requires a low temperature in order to get as much fat out as possible, because then we're going to use that fat to help saute all of our stuff. So I'm just, really what I'm doing with the onions and peppers, I'm just rough chopping them fairly small. You don't need to be too precise. No one's going to judge your knife skills when they're eating this. So we're going to set that aside. The same thing with the garlic. I'm going to mince it real as small as I can get, because last thing you want while you're eating is to bite into part of a clove of garlic. I mean, unless you really love garlic, but man, I love garlic, and that is just not for me. So, and then last but certainly not least, that is a bright light. Last but certainly not least is our bacon. Now, bacon comes in a bunch of delicious flavors. I would go, for this application, I would always go for one that you know that it has a certain smoke to it, like an apple wood or a cherry wood. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you should have out are your bell peppers, your bell pepper and onion, which were in the same bag. Your container of cumin and oregano is in the same container. It was labeled. Your bag of rice, your container of black beans, the small souffle cup of garlic, and the Ziploc bag of 2 strips of bacon, also known as the greatest meat ever cured. Huh? Why is bacon the greatest meat ever cured? Because it's pork belly. And what isn't delicious about pork? So with the bacon, we're just going to cut it into rough chunks. It doesn't need to be pretty. So now we have our onions and peppers cut, our garlic minced, Our bacon's chopped. We have our rice, our cumin and oregano, and our black beans ready to go. Also on hand, you should have a small container that looks like it has like some orange juice concentrate in the bottom of it, but it's not. It's actually chicken base. You can find this in most stores. Sometimes it's called chicken bouillon, and it's in a dry cube. But this is what we're going to use for our chicken stock when the time comes. So I've got our pan pretty warm. We're going to go ahead and add our bacon. Now, you may be wondering, but chef, why are you not adding any fat to that pan? Don't you need to add oil whenever you saute things? 9 times out of 10, you would be correct. This is the one time you're not. In this instance, what we're doing is, like I said, we're rendering the fat from the bacon, which means that we need a dry pan, and we're just trying to get the bacon fat. So, I actually might be running a little too hot. When you're running too hot, when you're rendering bacon, your bacon starts to brown before you really get any fat out of it. So what you're shooting for is you're not shooting to get it super brown and crispy, although it'll get there. It'll get there at the end of the day. What you're shooting for is, it's starting to pool a little bit. What you're shooting for is to really slow cook your bacon so that way you can extract as much fat out as possible. That not only helps your saute process here in a minute, but it adds so much flavor to your dish. Yeah, I was just waiting for some more fat to render. So, yeah, there we go. We're starting to look good. How's that, John? So if you'll see, you're starting to get some brown on the bottom. That's just fine. That's fine. And you'll see you have a lot of fat leaching out. And that's exactly what you want. You just want a light golden brown. If it's starting to get too dark or it's starting to smell too smoky, like you're starting to burn it, either turn your heat low or turn it off and let your pan cool back down. As long as it hasn't burnt, we're okay. So now I'm gonna turn it up a little bit because I think I turned it down too low. So, and this is a great way to extract a lot of flavor out of any fatty meat, really, typically pork, whether you're using ham for soup or bacon for soup for that matter, or bacon for rice. It's a great way to extract fat and flavor. Because your 3 biggest vehicles of flavor will always be fat, salt, and sugar. Always. Well, there are different tastes that you have, but the easiest way to convey flavor is to make things, salt will always carry flavor, fat will always carry flavor because it helps coat your tongue and it makes everything rich and decadent and delicious. And sugar always does because everyone loves sugar. Sugar's a natural drug, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor, or a dietitian, but I know a few. So, if you're looking right now at your pan, that look good, John? So you should see you got a lot of foam. That's okay, because you got a lot of fat coming out. Your bacon should be starting to crisp. So, any questions there, my friend? Mm-hmm. One question I have is what's it called at the bottom of the pan? Fond. The French term is fond. And that's what all this brown on the bottom of the pan is. Now, we'll be able to tell at the end if we've done our job right because when we go to pull the rice out of the pan, there should be nothing on the bottom. Not one thing. Nope. It should be a clean bottom pan. So, we're just about there. Our smaller bits are getting nice and are starting to get really crisp. We have a healthy layer of fat there. So then we're going to go ahead and add our onions and peppers.
What's a good substitution if they're not a big fan of one or the other?
Well, you can omit them entirely. That works too. A carrot, celery, something that's a little bit more fibrous that'll withstand the cooking process. A hearty squash, butternut, acorn, nothing seedy or light like zucchini or yellow squash, because those will just disintegrate and you'll never find them. Yeah. So I've added the onions and peppers, and I'm going to take about half of the garlic that I minced, and everything's in. And then also in your boxes, I forgot to mention, so apologies for that. You should all have a container of salt and pepper. So always, no matter what you're cooking, at every stage, season with just a little salt and pepper. Because what you're doing by rendering fat, and then by adding in these onions and peppers, which will provide flavor and aromatic to your dish, you're building different layers of flavor, so that way at the end, you have this delicious, complete package. So,
Like you.
Yes, thank you. But, yeah, you always season, so that way at the end, you're not, because at the end, if you don't season your way up, at the end, you're going to end up over-seasoning, and then who knows what you're going to get. So at this time, too, we're going to add our cumin and oregano. Again, what you're going to notice, especially once we get into the next part, once we get into cooking pork, you're going to see that there are a lot of common herbs and spices used throughout, well, I mean, really throughout Latin America, but depending on where you go, once you hit Jamaica and the Dominican Republic and some of the smaller islands, you tend to get into a little bit more African influence, and you even start getting into Far Eastern influence or some Jamaican curries and stuff like that.
So if you wanted to add like a spicy pepper to the rice and beans, is it better to add it in now and let it simmer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make it too hot?
No.
Okay.
No, actually the heat will help degrade, the cooking heat will help degrade the physical heat. And if you want to stay true to an island theme to use a different pepper, like a hot pepper, you definitely want to go with a Scotch bonnet or habanero. Scotch bonnet's more traditional, at least in Jamaican. You'll find variations of habaneros. Really, their calling card is the Scotch bonnet, but you'll find variations of bells and different hot peppers.
How hot is the Scotch bonnet comparably to other well-known peppers?
For me, a Scotch bonnet is probably a little hotter than habanero. But you're talking to a guy that eats ghost chili, so yeah, not you. No, I love heat. So if we look at our pan now, our fond is a little darker brown. Our onions are a little translucent. Our peppers are starting to soften. We're right about where we need to be. So next, we're going to take our bag of rice. We're going to go ahead and add that. We're going to go ahead and stir that around. We're going to start toasting our rice. What that does is that helps start to pull the starch out of it, and it helps give it another aromatic flavor. And the rice that you guys have is really basic parboiled rice, super easy to cook, super easy to deal with, and it's a lot more forgiving than if you were to look at your long grain blends or your brown rices, or even if you start looking in your Far East rices like your jasmines and basmatis, because they don't require as much care. Typically, when you get long grain rice from the store, you still need to rinse it or soak it, let all that excess starch come off, and try and get any, because believe it or not, pebbles and a whole bunch of stuff get stuck in rice bags. So typically when you buy rice from the store, you still need to wash it, pre-treat it, whatnot. Whereas if you buy the parboiled stuff, like your Uncle Ben's, even though it's okay rice, you don't need to go through the process. Parboil is where they take the rice, they clean it and polish it, and then they parboil it. They'll boil it for just a few minutes to make sure that it's clean, it's set, and then that way it cooks a lot faster. So if we're looking in our pan now, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not burning things. I don't want to show them something I'm burning. But luckily I'm not burning. So if you look in your pan right now, your fond should be a nice dark brown, and your rice is pretty opaque. It's starting to toast, it's starting to turn colors. Your onions are fairly translucent. Your peppers are soft. So we're just about where we need to be to add our stock and beans and let that simmer. So if you take your lovely chicken base container, which again looks like orange juice concentrate, I promise you it's not. We're going to add some water. Fill your cup as far as you feel comfortable. I prefer all the way to the top because we're going to use some of this a little later. And then take a spoon. I always keep spoons handy on me in my kitchen when I'm cooking at home. I mean, when you're at home, you can use one spoon because, I mean, who else is going to eat it aside from you? What, your family? I don't know. But here I always keep a bunch of plastic spoons near me. So we're going to stir it. And of course, I'm splashing a little bit. We're going to stir it until it's dissolved. It's your what's going to end up being chicken stock or chicken broth. Some people call it chicken broth. They're lying, but that's okay. Chicken broth is already seasoned, whereas, so if you buy chicken stock, if you buy the box of chicken stock at the store, that is not seasoned. That is just chicken stock. It hasn't had any salt added to it. It hasn't had anything else added to it. If you buy chicken broth, that's already seasoned, typically with salt. Typically it's got herbs in it like thyme and rosemary and some garlic. So basically you can make your own chicken soup right out of it without having to do any of the hard work. So my chicken stock is a pale yellow, like so, almost like lemon or lime juice. We're going to pour about 3/4 of it right in our pan. We get a nice good sizzle. And then we're going to go ahead and stir. And while we've got that in there, we're going to go ahead and add our black beans and stir. Oh yeah, that smells delicious. Then again, we're going to salt and we're going to pepper. I don't know why I had to add that pepper, but And one thing I always do with rice before I let it simmer is I grab another tasting spoon and I actually just take a little bit of the liquid off the top and taste it, and that tastes delicious. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add just a pinch more salt. Because whenever you're cooking rice in an application like this, or whether you're making Spanish rice, or cheesy rice, or whatever it is you do with rice, you always want the liquid to be salty, just a little bit saltier than you want your final dish to be. Because then by the time the rice absorbs all that liquid, it'll be perfect. So, let me get organized here. Can I have that garbage can? So, we're gonna bring this up to just a little bit of a bubble. I don't wanna go a full boil or a full rolling boil. So, but a watch pot never boils. So, while that's going, or while we're waiting for that to come up, go ahead and grab the stuff we're gonna need for our pork, which is our pork chop in a bag, our orange juice, a container labeled OJ, our separate spices, oregano, cumin, chili powder, and coriander, and then we have some lime juice and some cider vinegar. What you'll also have in your boxes is a little bunch of cilantro, and I put that in there as a garnish, so when we're all done, you can just run a knife through it real fast, make it all look pretty, because that's the important part. Well, one of the important parts. You always eat with your eyes first. I don't care what anyone says. So, this is what my mixture looks like now. You can see it's just gently bubbling, which is exactly where I want it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it down low. If you had more time, you could actually turn it off, providing you're keeping it on the same burner, but it depends on what you're using, whether you're using gas versus electric. I mean, I could talk about that for days, but I don't think we have that kind of time. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some heat underneath my saute pan here. Again, medium to medium high. That's what and I'm just gonna grab, I have a bowl here handy. You can grab a plate. You can use a Tupperware container. Whatever you want to use to mix your spices. So I've got my coriander in first. And my chili powder. And then my cumin. My oregano. We're gonna go ahead and just give that whole spice mixture just a little toss together, so that we've got everything incorporated. Just gonna take a peek under. Yep, we're still bubbling pretty well. So I'm gonna take my pork chop. And I'm just gonna press it in this spice mixture, try and get it as well coated as possible. So that I'm well coated on both front and back, and and top and bottom and side to side and left and right. So if you're using a nonstick pan at home, you can do this in a dry pan. I would highly advise not doing it in a dry pan because flames could happen. Cast iron, if you've taken care of it, you could do it in a dry pan. But if you don't take care, if you have cast iron, treat it like gold. Like take care of it, baby it, don't let it rust, season it regularly. Take it out of the cupboard every once in a while and show it some love because it deserves it. But you're going to want to put a little bit of oil in the bottom of your pan, whether you have vegetable oil, canola oil, olive oil, coconut oil. I don't know why. I mean, you could use coconut oil, but it'd kind of be weird. I mean, it would fit, but that'd be more Jamaican, and now we're just diving down rabbit hole. So, because I'm nosy, I'm actually going to turn off the heat on my rice, but keep the lid on so I don't lose too much water. So, in case you're not comfortable just putting your hand over a hot pan, which I totally understand why you wouldn't be, dip your finger in some water and just drop it over. If you get a reaction like that, that's pretty good. That means I'm almost there. Because the higher the heat, the bigger the reaction. But we're almost there. So, any questions there, John? Okie dokie. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my pork chop in my pan. Before I do it, I'm going to go ahead and salt. I'm not going to pepper. This is just my personal taste because I have chili powder in there. We have enough chili powder in there. I just don't see the need to add any pepper to it. So gentle little sear, which is fine because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up braising it. So the reason we're on medium to medium high heat is so that we can cook it longer without really burning it. Because we're going to do a little braise in here, and we're going to make a little pan sauce. We're going to get a little fancy. So. Chicken. To stay authentic chicken. Because throughout the Caribbean, throughout the islands, I mean really throughout Latin America, until you start getting into Mexico and further into South America where they had enough land to raise cattle, the reason why pork and chicken and fish are so ubiquitous throughout Latin America is because they didn't have land to raise cattle. So that's why in the Far East, if you look at China and Japan and Thailand and all of Southeast Asia, again, pork, seafood, chicken, because they're easy and they don't require the land to raise like cattle does. A vegetarian option? That would depend on your taste. If you're looking for a protein alternative, my favorite protein alternative is always tempeh or a firm tofu. Seitan, but that's my personal taste. But if you're looking for something like an actual vegetable to replace it, this would be great with like a whole butternut squash. Like if you roasted a butternut squash or pan-seared butternut squash and roasted it to top your black beans and rice. I mean, you obviously wouldn't put the bacon on it either, but that would be another really good option. So we're going to play a little peekaboo. Nope. So you could also do this with beef, but typically even if when beef is used in Latin American cuisine, typically it's the tougher cuts because that's what a lot of cuisines around the world were built on poor people and built around what poor people ate. And a lot of times it's the tougher cuts of meat. It's your flanks, it's your shanks, your chucks, all that stuff that's got a lot of connective tissue that requires a lot of time to cook and some technique and a little love to make it work. That's what a lot of cuisines around the world were built on. They weren't built on fillets or New York strips or tenderloins. And anyone that says a tenderloin has more flavor, like a pork tenderloin has more flavor than a pork shoulder, you should quit talking to them immediately. Immediately. Huh? But again, my personal opinion, I'm not trying to push my agenda on you. Yeah. Oh, that looks good. So if we just lift the lid on our rice here, I can tell you right now by the way that my rice looks, it's still a little firm in the center, so it's probably still a little crunchy, but it's all coming together. I still have a little liquid in there, so I could probably turn the heat up and give it a little bump. But go ahead and give yours a taste. See if your rice is a little crunchy. Probably is. I know this is, but I'm angling for this piece of bacon over here. Yeah. What about like not associating with people that prefer tenderloin to pork shoulder? If someone tries to tell you that a filet mignon is the best cut of steak, do not listen to them. Your best cuts are always your fattier cuts. My personal favorite's a ribeye. And don't get me wrong, fillets are delicious, but there's no fat. There's no connective tissue. It's all just lean muscle. So it has no flavor. Because like I said earlier, fat is flavor. So my pork chop's a little odd shaped, so I'm going to sear it on the third side as well. Just because. If anyone tells you that chicken breasts are better than chicken thighs, they're wrong. Chicken thighs are the superior cut of the chicken, along with the leg. And I never understood the argument between, on the chicken wing, between the flat and the drum end. I've never understood that. That doesn't make any sense to me. Just eat the damn chicken wing. Really? I don't get it. Trying to think what other things I have staunch opinions about. There's a lot of them. Oh, pancakes are the superior battered breakfast item. Waffles are not. French toast is also an acceptable answer, although you are not as correct as pancakes. Bacon is also the superior breakfast meat. Ham is third. Sausage links or patties, while links is the correct answer, are interchangeable. So, where your pork chop should be here is as you're pushing on it, you should get a little give back, because I know it's not done. But I'm going to show you a little chef's trick on how to guess at how it's done without stabbing it. So as you're poking at it, it should spring back on you, which is exactly what you want. I'm going to add the last of my garlic to the pan. I'm going to add the last little bit of chicken stock. And at this point, let your chicken stock cook a little bit. And then we're going to turn the heat down. Turn the heat down to make sure you're definitely at medium, if not a little lower. Then we're going to take our container of OJ. And this is what's making is the base for our moho. So a little OJ, some lime juice.
It was base for what, chef?
Moho sauce. What moho is it's a traditional Cuban sauce. Typically, it's a marinade. It's orange juice, lime juice, all the spices that I conveniently I rub the pork with. And typically, it's finished with some cilantro. But typically, the pork's marinated in it, and then it's slow roasted, whether that's in banana leaves. They wrap them in banana leaves and bury them underground, or slow roasting in an oven, you know, like normal people. So I've turned my heat down, and we're gonna bring this back up to a bubble. And you're gonna definitely want to keep as your sauce starts to heat, you're definitely gonna want to keep flipping your pork. That's could be an innuendo, I guess. I don't know. So while we're waiting for that to come back up, let's go ahead and taste our beans and rice here. Needs just a little bit more time. And it's okay if you don't have enough, or if if you started too high and you don't have enough moisture in your pan, to add just a little bit of water, like I'm gonna do right now. Probably just like a quarter cup. But also remember too, to add just a pinch of salt when you do that, so that way you're maintaining a consistent sodium level. Because if you add too much water, that water is going to pull that salt out, and then your flavorful dish will go too bland in a hurry. So,
Chef, would you recommend iodized or kosher salt?
Kosher salt for cooking, iodized salt for baking. And the reason for that is kosher salt has larger crystals. And typically in baking, because baking is way more exact than what I'm doing right now. And in baking, salt crystals can harm the structure of your cake, your bread, your dough, because of how abrasive they are. And that can totally change the structure of what you're baking. Whereas iodized are smooth and small and nice and polite. And they help build even layers and an even structure to whatever you're baking. So what I'm gonna do, just because it's cheesy and it's funny to me, is every cooking show you've ever watched where they like do steaks or pork chops in a pan, I'll bet you've seen people baste. And if you don't know what basting is, I'm gonna show you. So I have my sauce in my pan here, and I'm just gonna spoon it over. I'm doing this very sarcastically, so I apologize, but spoon it over. Instead of basting, what I do is I just make sure I flip it often, because basting to me has always been pretentious, but that's just me. Again, not trying to push my agenda on you. So I'm actually going to turn my heat up a bit because I'm impatient and I'm trying to get this to bubble. It was until I took that basting detour. So again, flip. So, and this, what I'm doing right now is not traditional Latin American. This is so French that it'll probably have an accent. But the flavors behind it are very traditional to what it is. And that was my whole intent, is traditional flavors in a different way.
So how would they make it?
Traditionally, mojo pork, you would marinate your pork shoulder in mojo, which is orange juice, lime juice, cider vinegar, chili powder, cumin, coriander, depending on whose grandmother's making it. Much like all great cuisines, it's all dictated by old ladies. So you would marinate it overnight, and then it would slow cook. So it's like like Cuban barbecue pulled pork. And you'd take your liquid, and that would basically be your sauce to go back over it. So I'm doing something similar, but I'm using a lot of French techniques. So I want this to bubble a little bit more so I can pull it off the burner. So, as you can see right there, it came off the heat. So,
Hey, Chef,
yo,
one of the questions was, what is the vinegar for?
the vinegar helps add more acidity. And now I'm sure you're thinking, but you've already got orange juice and lime juice. What do you need more acidity for? Cider vinegar provides a different kind of sweetness. Lime juice, if any of you have, oh, am I gonna sneeze? No, I'm not. So, I thought it was coming, I'm sorry. So if you've ever taken a shot of lime juice, eaten a lime, you get that really sour, puckery taste to it. And if you've ever had fresh orange juice, not the Minute Maid for kids with calcium and vitamin D, but actual orange juice, it's nice and sweet, but it's acidic and it still has some sour to it. Cider vinegar has the acidity, but without that real heavy sour complement to it, it's a little bit on the sweeter side as far as vinegars go. Plus, cider vinegar and pork are a classic combination, and you don't mess with the classics.
What are some other classics?
Thyme and pork's another one. Sage and pork's another one. Rosemary and red meat. Rosemary and potatoes. Cilantro and any citrus for the most part until you get into like grapefruit. But grapefruit's really weird all on its own. Cumin and coriander are classics. Like I said to start, when you look at a lot of Latin American cooking, it's cumin, coriander, chili powder in some shape or form. Other just super classics.
What about Indian food?
What about an Indian food? Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, ginger. Ginger's ubiquitous in Indian. So coconut milk, not so much. That's more of a European, like when they came to Britain, like if you go overseas, a lot of your British curries are made with coconut milk or yogurt or cream. That's not always the case in traditional Indian food. Cardamom, I'm blanking. Because there are two different, green and black cardamom, clove, cinnamon, anything real earthy, you'll find that a lot in Indian. Like to make, some people say curry's simple, but to make a traditional curry requires probably about 24 ingredients-ish to do it right. And then you got to toast spices, and you have to toast some and then grind them and then toast them again, and it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do really good curry. So what should be going on in your pan right now is you should be almost at a boil. It should be simmering really hard, and you'll notice that your sauce is starting to thicken. It's starting to develop a sheen. That's because we're using the natural sugars in the orange juice, the lime juice, and the vinegar to thicken the sauce, as opposed to getting messy and cheating and using cornstarch, or getting more French and using butter and flour. You could also use arrowroot. Arrowroot thickens, much like cornstarch. And what you should be feeling if you kind of poke at your pork chop with your tongs is that initial give that you got isn't as strong right now. It's a lot firmer. If you're using a meat thermometer, which I will use to confirm, pork should always come in at least 145. The old number used to be 155, and 155 works, but 155 gives you like really done pork. And people got really nervous about pork that's just a little pink in the center, which is okay, it's not gonna kill you. So we're just going to keep turning. Paige, could you grab me a thermometer? Because I forgot one. What's up? Oh. So, while we're waiting for this to finish cooking, we're going to go ahead and look at our rice, which, I don't know about yours, but mine looks pretty good. You can see right now where the rice grains are total. There's very few that are opaque or any kind of translucent. They're all pretty fully white and cooked. But I'm gonna taste again because I don't want to say, oh yeah, it's cooked, and then go to eat it and go, oh no, it's not. 1A. Yep. And you want your rice when you're cooking rice, you want your rice to always have a bite to it, much like when you cook pasta. When you cook pasta, no one likes mushy pasta. And if you like mushy pasta, don't tell me. I don't want to, just don't. Same thing with rice. No one likes mushy rice because it's just a ball of starch. And who wants that? So when you bite into rice, it shouldn't be crunchy, but it should have a little bit of a bite to it. It should fight back. So we're going to go ahead and stab here. Perfect. We are at 142 right now. So, and this is a thicker chop. If you the ones that you guys received in your boxes should be just about done by now. And your sauce in your pan should look a little bit like this. It's got a little bit of a gloss to it, but it's not too thick, it's not too watery. So we're going to go ahead and let that finish. And in the meantime, we're going to make a mocktail. Woo, yay! Not drinking. Woo! So, what we're going to make is what's called a Kanchanchara. It's traditional Cuban. Typically it's made with rum. Bowl. Perfect. So I'm going to turn the heat way down on that because that'll be done. And whenever you're dealing with meats and steaks at home, because I said 145 doesn't mean you pull it off the heat at 145. You're going to want to pull it out at probably 135. And now you're probably wondering, but chef, why would I do that? It's clearly not done. Well, lucky for you, I have an answer for you. So when you're pulling it off the heat, what happens is that meat continues to cook. It doesn't instantly cool to room temperature. It continues to cook on its way out. So when you pull, whether it's a steak or a roast or a pork chop, it's going to carry over cook about 10 degrees as long as you let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. It'll keep carrying over, which you should always let it rest before you slice into it. That way the meat, all the juices come back in and you don't have a runny plate because no one wants a runny plate. So, in the meantime, I mean, some ice wouldn't hurt. I was okay to make it without ice, but. So for this drink, we have some honey, some lime juice that says LJ drink. It's thanks to our crack labeling. And a couple of strawberries. Now, first what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the stem end off of the strawberry. Or you can cut it off if you have a knife. So, that's okay. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and drop our strawberries in the bottom of the glass. And if you're a real pro and you have a muddler at home, where you can actually, which is actually just a glorified dowel to smash strawberries. And technically I do, but because I didn't think all of you did, I figured that I would tough it out with you. And I'm using a spoon. You could use a fork. You could use the handle of a kitchen spoon. So basically what I'm doing is I'm smashing these strawberries to try and get as much juice and flavor out of them as I can. Now you could cheat. You could cheat and buy some form of strawberry syrup, whatever that sugary drink additive stuff is they sell at the store. You could do that. But that would be cheating. And cheating is wrong. So what we're gonna do is once we have our strawberries in, we're gonna add our Sprite. Now, like I said, classically, this is a real cocktail. So classically, it would have white rum, which is clear, which always too sweet for me, and some tonic. What am I gonna do instead? Sprite. I know I should hold the glass at an angle so this doesn't foam that much, but I don't mind the foam. And now here comes the part that's really gonna depend on you. This drink also has lime juice and honey. Now, I'm gonna add all the lime juice because I enjoy lime juice and I like my beverages tart, especially if they have alcohol in them. And then I'm just gonna add just a little bit of honey because again, I prefer a tart beverage. If you prefer a sweet beverage, that's okay. And then I'm gonna go ahead and give that a stir. And a little swig. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that's right on the money. I'd buy that for $1. So, now that our beverage is done, our pork is done, our rice is done, now it's all the time. Now this is the cool part because this is where you get to make things look pretty. So, I'm gonna go with a bowl. I was gonna move it over, but it's fine. And we're gonna drop our rice and beans in here first. They look real pretty. And then just gonna slice my pork chop here, which I mean that kind of color, you can't beat that. That's just delicious. So we're gonna kind of fan it there in my rice. And then we're gonna pour our little loose glaze over it. And this, my friends, is I don't have it in my box. So, and this, my friends, is our black beans and rice with mojo glazed pork. Now, like I said, you guys had some cilantro in your boxes. This would be the time to give it a rough chop, throw it over top. It adds a nice floral note. Oh, thank you, Magic Cilantro. through the magic and power of the internet, I have acquired some cilantro. So we're just gonna rough chop, and before anyone says anything, oh man, why are there stems in there? You're not supposed to chop the herb stems. With cilantro, I think the stems add a nice earthy flavor. Same thing with parsley. The stems are edible. As long as you cut them small enough, they're not an inconvenience and you barely notice that they're there. So we're just gonna drop some cilantro right over the top. And that, my friends, is delicious dinner. That's all I've got for you, unless there are any questions.
1 second, let's find out.
I'm ready. At a wide stance for answering questions.
We got it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you guys took the time to hang out with us tonight and listen to me ramble about things.